selected ones. Whether they like it or not, what is done in secret will eventually be discovered. No agenda remains hidden forever, which is a universal fact that most people overlook until it's too late. God was already turning on the lights the instant they believed they had you imprisoned, certain that their masks would never come off, revealing every plot, every falsehood, and every muttered betrayal. The truth is that 80% of deceitful people eventually reveal themselves by their own acts, according to research. The remaining 20%, well, let's say divine intervention, has a way of accelerating the process. Let's face it though, some of them were so audacious in their plans that they essentially invited their own demise. God made sure their repercussions were front row center stage, without any intermission, even though they plotted in secret. The best part is that you didn't have to do anything at all. It's not only about exposing the truth when God reveals someone's hidden motive, it's also about removing all of their previous influence over you. That's the true penalty, not a spectacular collapse or a raucous public humiliation. Their impact vanishes once people realize who they really are. The fact that they are no longer able to control, manage, or lie is a worse fate than any retaliation you could possibly devise. Initially, they are unaware of what is happening. They will continue to try to move in the same manner and pull the same strings, but all of a sudden, things stop working. People no longer react the same way. Their words no longer land the same way, and the fear, perplexity, or awe they once inspired is gone. They are nothing without it. When their plan is revealed, all of that falls apart, leaving them with a situation they never anticipated: helplessness. They have spent years creating a false image and meticulously establishing a reputation built on deceit, manipulation, and falsehoods. For them, this is where the really anguish starts. They were strong because of what people didn't know and thrived on secrecy, but now they encounter suspicion, side-eye, and people who have finally woken up everywhere they go. Deep down, they sense that the walls are closing in, and that the authority they once took for granted is vanishing, and they may attempt to deny it, play the victim, or even assign blame. It was the presence of God in you that they were attacking, not you. You were never the issue. Rather, it was what you carried, the favor you bestowed, the way you moved, and the way doors opened for you when they ought to have remained closed. They couldn't explain why it annoyed them. A few of them persuaded themselves that they simply didn't like you, that you offended them, or that there was something unsettling about you. In actuality, though, it was the light within you that revealed the darkness within them, not you, that caused them discomfort. Their animosity was so intense because of this, which is why their attacks felt so personal. They were fighting the anointing on your life, not flesh and blood, and they would never prevail in that struggle, regardless of how kind you were to them, how you never harmed them, or how you avoided getting in their way. They pursued you because you were the closest thing they could get to God, who was always the true target. They attempted to undermine your confidence, crush your spirit, and cause you to question your value. They believed that they could halt God's work through you if they could deplete, divert, or demoralize you. They were unaware that each attack just served to increase your strength, knowledge, and self-awareness. And now that their goal is known, everything is in the open. The attempts to undermine you, the jealousy, and the covert competition. What they failed to realize from the beginning is that your purpose is not something they can fight, but rather something that God has ordained. And if they couldn't stop him, they were never going to stop you. They can no longer hide it. And the worst part for them is that they have to watch you continue to rise, grow, and be blessed. The people who conspired against you eventually discover something horrifying. You're not even considering retaliation. They're deeply shaken by the fact that you've moved on and aren't spiteful or attempting to exact revenge, because in their minds, they had control over you. They thought they had control over your emotions, reactions, and way of life. So when you don't react the way they expected, it gets to them. To begin with, they had no actual power. They needed evidence that they had rocked your world, so they were waiting for a fight, for you to get upset, to lash out, to demonstrate that their actions had an impact on you. Instead, you persisted, you prevailed, and you continued to walk in peace as they struggled with their own shame, remorse, and repercussions. At that point, they begin to fall apart. Their exposure truly starts to set in at this point, because they must now confront the truth about who they are, as well as what they accomplished. They must accept that their plans failed to shatter you, that their attempts to do so only backfired, and that the power they believed they possessed was really a delusion. The cruel thing is that they are left to deal with themselves when you don't interact with them or give them the response they desire. There are no excuses or diversions, just them sitting in the mess they made. Because God has a way of forcing individuals to face their own darkness, they begin to experience the consequences of all they did, not because they are being punished. They initially wanted you to feel isolated. They put a lot of effort into making others dislike you by disseminating false information, sowing doubt, and controlling circumstances to make you appear to be the issue. In order to make you doubt yourself and feel alone, they sought to isolate you. They were unaware that God watched everything, and when the truth was revealed, things quickly changed. Now, people are avoiding them. The same individuals they formerly mobilized against have suddenly become silent. They no longer show up or answer calls as frequently as they once did. The truth has a way of forcing individuals to reconsider their affiliations, so the support, the laughter, and the phony allegiance all vanish, and those who once supported someone start to view them differently when their dishonesty is revealed. It's simply human nature. No one wants to be connected with someone who has been exposed as a liar, manipulator, or fraud, and it has nothing to do with seeking retribution. People take mental notes in the back of their minds, even if they don't express it aloud. They recall this person's movements, the deception, the treachery, and the devious methods, and gradually, without warning, the gap widens. For them, the worst aspect is that it doesn't always happen right away. First, it occurs in subtle, nearly imperceptible ways. Conversations feel different, invitations stop coming, and people who used to be on their corner begin to hesitate. When the deceptive world they created begins to fall apart, reality sets in. The seclusion they had intended for you has now become their own. While they sit in silence, understanding that the multitude they previously controlled has vanished and that they must now confront the one thing they have always tried to avoid, themselves. You were never truly alone. God was always with you. When everything is revealed, they realize themselves for who they really are, not simply how the outside world perceives them. They lived in denial for a long time, so that's the true horror. They persuaded themselves that you were the issue, that they were correct, and that they were justified. But there's no getting around the truth once it's out. All of the lies they have spoken, the schemes they have carried out, and the times they have manipulated events are all glaring back at them like an unfiltered mirror that they are unable to ignore. They can't lie to themselves the way they lied to everyone else, and that's the part they weren't prepared for. They may make an effort, but they are aware of the harm they have caused. It is oppressive to realize that they did this to themselves and that they are aware of the bridges they destroyed. They will initially attempt to place the blame elsewhere, perhaps by deceiving themselves into believing they were the victim, or by telling themselves that others have unfairly betrayed them. But the quiet surrounding them is too loud. When they have no one left to control, they are forced to sit with the one person they have been avoiding all along, themselves. The energy they once relied on has disappeared, as has the influence they once had over others. The shame, remorse, and emptiness begin to consume some of them, and they are unable to cope. In the quiet moments when no one is looking, they feel it, that weight, that sorrow, that horrifying understanding that their greatest enemy was never you, but always their own reflection. They may put on a false grin, act as though nothing has changed, and pretend everything is okay. The saddest part is that once God exposes them, the only thing they can't avoid is the truth, which is what ruins them from the inside out. No one can save them from that, not even their own lies, not you or the people they used to deceive. When you are being assaulted, deceived, or wrongly accused, one of the most difficult things to comprehend is why God permits it to continue for such a long time. The truth is that He wasn't ignoring it. Rather, He was allowing them to build their own grave. You may ask yourself, why isn't God stepping in? Why is He letting them get away with it? When you witness the deception, the manipulation, and the covert agendas, they might have been able to talk their way out of it if God had revealed them too soon. They could have played the victim, fabricated stories, or tricked people into thinking they were innocent. However, He allowed them to go farther. He allowed them to grow so accustomed to their deceit that they lost their caution. They became more confident, believed they were untouchable, and were unaware that every action they took, every lie they said, and every trap they constructed was simply paving the way for their demise. By the time the exposure arrived, they had no way out. God knew just when to draw the curtain back. Not only were they apprehended, but they were also buried because the evidence was too strong. Their own deeds proved their guilt, and the people they deceived eventually realized who they truly were. What made divine justice so potent is that there was no way to reverse the story, no way to repair the damage, and no way to change the narrative. God allows adversaries to reveal themselves, not only His foes. He permits them to continue excavating until they run out of options. They were simply heading into their own destruction the entire time, even if they believed they were winning and making progress. Some of them refused to accept their fate. They refused to take responsibility. They refused to humble themselves, and they refused to genuinely change once the expose has ruined everything they built on deceit. Rather, they will come back to you, not out of love or sincere regret, but out of desperation, because they will realize that you are still standing when all else fails. They want access to the very thing they attempted to destroy because they see that you overcame what was intended to break you, that you continued to grow, to win, and to walk in the favor they once tried to block. This isn't because they value you or regret what they did, but rather because they understand that your anointing was always what made you unique, and they need it. Thus, they will return with well-chosen phrases, apologies, and a phony humility. They will say that they've changed, that they've seen the light, and that they want to put things right. However, pay attention to what they do, because real change comes from repentance, not exposure, and the most of them are returning to survive rather than repent. They want to avoid the criticism they're receiving, and they want to cling to your positive energy, tranquility, and favor in the hopes that being near you can change their current circumstances. However, a snake just sheds its skin. It doesn't change. If given the opportunity, the same person who has once betrayed you will do so again. If they believe they can get away with it, the same person who planned your downfall will do it again. Discipline is essential because not everyone deserves a second chance. Some people were removed for a reason, and some bridges needed to be burned. When God exposes someone, you don't rebuild what He destroyed. Instead, you leave them where they are and let them deal with the consequences they have worked so hard to avoid, because if they were truly sorry, they wouldn't need an audience to prove it. You became their fascination for some reason. They were watching you, studying you, trying to figure out how you kept succeeding, how you kept getting back up, and how you carried yourself with a confidence they couldn't shake. You weren't bothering them, you weren't competing with them, and you weren't even thinking about them. It became their full-time job to see you fail because they wanted it so much. They scrutinized every action you took, despised every favor you were given, and prayed that every challenge you encountered would be the one to bring you down. However, they made the fatal error of losing sight of their own lives while concentrating all of their efforts on bringing you down. Because in reality, they never really had any control over you. They might disparage you, tell lies about you, or conspire against you in the background, but it wouldn't change what God was accomplishing in your life. Their fixation just served to divert their attention while they were busy hatching plans. You were developing while they hoped you would fail. You were rising, and the energy they were always directing at, you could only return to them. The reason they destroyed themselves was not because you fought back or responded, but rather because their whole concentration was on destroying you rather than advancing themselves. They made an investment in your demise rather than their own development, and now all they have to show for it is a life filled with repercussions, a life they built themselves. Their destruction was always self-inflicted and never your fault. Ironically, you were never even in the race with them, but they wrecked themselves because they felt they were coming for you. They competed against someone who wasn't competing back for all that time, and while you continued to walk in peace, they ultimately ran headlong into their own death. Some battles are about demonstrating your true self, not about winning or losing. Whether they realized it or not, they entered your life as a test of your moral character, your endurance, and your faith. But you didn't fall for their tricks. You didn't put yourself in their shoes. You didn't allow their lies to make you a liar, or their betrayal to make you a betrayer. And that's where they failed, because they were so intent on making you look bad that they didn't realize they were the only ones being exposed. They wanted to push you to your limits, tempt you to respond in ways that would justify their actions, and make you step out of character so they could say, "See, they're just like me." In the end, people began to doubt their own character, even though they wanted others to doubt yours. Every trap they constructed, every lie they propagated, and every plan they carried out proved to be evidence of their own depravity. They were disclosing everything about themselves, not anything about you. And here's the bit they didn't anticipate. Their exposure required them to see themselves, not simply the reality as it was seen by those around them. There are no more justifications or pretenses. The proof is there and cannot be denied. You proved that integrity always triumphs over manipulation, while they became living evidence of their own dishonesty. Because of this, you're still standing, your reputation is still intact, and you emerged from this stronger than they were, despite losing the exact thing they were attempting to take away from you: credibility. You become the lesson for them, not simply a test for you. There isn't necessarily a dramatic moment, a big exposé, an explosive confrontation, or public humiliation associated with true exposure. Silence is when the strongest exposes occur. Nobody has to call them out or make an announcement about what they've done. The harm is done the instant they lose people's faith. They don't even understand what's going on at first. They believe they're safe and have gotten away with it, but gradually, quietly, things begin to change. They begin to fear when the same individuals who formerly supported and believed in them stop doing so. The tone of the conversations changes, and the vibe changes. Although no one confronts them directly or tells them plainly that they have been exposed, doors that were previously open begin to close. Invitations cease to come. The support they once took for granted vanishes, and their power diminishes. The worst part is that they don't know how to restore trust, because it doesn't return with an apology or a well-reasoned justification. Cutting them off doesn't cause a scene. They simply move differently. They simply cease believing. They don't debate or expend energy attempting to prove something. They are destroyed by the slow, silent knowledge that they have lost their credibility and that there is nothing they can do to regain it, not by a scandal or public disgrace. They desired power, attention, and approval, but when God exposes someone, He not only takes away their possessions, but also their reputation. And once that is altered, their demise is certain, since nothing is more audible than the quiet of those who have finally realized the truth. Karma strikes silently, like a thief in the night, and doesn't arrive with a warning, make a big entrance, or tap someone on the shoulder and say, "Hey, remember all the things you did? Now it's your turn." A missed chance here, a financial setback there, the people they previously controlled slipping away one by one. Life began to fall apart in the simplest, most unexpected ways while they were waiting for some great, spectacular punishment. They don't even realize it at first. They assume it's simply a bad spell, a brief setback, or a difficult patch, but things keep getting worse. Their world begins to crumble gradually, not in a violent explosion, but in a long, ruthless deterioration. By the time they understand what's happening, it's too late. The same betrayal they disheveled knocks on their door. The same falsehoods they spread begin to work against them, and the same sabotage they planned for you resurfaces in unexpected ways. The ties they depended on are gone. The security they boasted about is fragile, and the confidence they once had is replaced with dread. One day, they wake up and everything feels different. They recognize that they have nothing left due of their own acts, not because they were harmed by someone or because they retaliated. You see, karma isn't loud. It doesn't always arrive in the manner that they anticipate. It appears through the cracks, the little moments they chose to ignore, and the gradual disintegration of everything they once valued. By the time they realize what's happening, they are powerless to stop it. All they can do is sit in the mess they made for themselves and wonder how it all went so wrong, never realizing it was going wrong from the moment they made the decision to move in the manner that they did. It was evident that they believed nothing could affect them at one point because of their almost intolerable arrogance, the way they spoke, the way they walked, and the way they disregarded every warning. They dismissed responsibility, laughed at the idea of repercussions, and told themselves they were too intelligent, too well-connected, and too strong to ever fail. But pay close attention now. The same laughter no longer sounds the same, because it is now desperation rather than confidence. It is a frightened, forced laugh to cover up the heartbreaking knowledge that they made a mistake. the exact thing they ridiculed. The notion that they would eventually have to answer for what they did became their reality when the exposure and repercussions came. They will initially maintain appearances, publish as though they are still winning, and act as though everything is well. However, those who were earlier standing with them are now observing from a distance. The artificial smile doesn't hit as hard, and the laugh seems empty. They are unable to reverse it, which is the hardest part. They created their own demise, and no amount of coercion, clever justification, or abrupt change of heart can undo it. The conceit that caused them to chuckle at the idea of karma is the same conceit that prevented them from seeing that it was already imminent. These days, they laugh not because they feel strong, but rather because they are at a loss for what to do. It's the laugh of someone drowning, but still acting like they can swim. A laugh that conceals panic, a laugh that covers regret, a laugh that no longer fools anyone because they realize this is no longer funny once the consequences of their actions catch up to them. They weren't the only ones who were exposed. Everyone else was also watching. Believe me, people were keeping an eye on things, some in secret, some on the sidelines, some feigning neutrality while quietly deciding which side to support. And when the fall came, the message was louder than words could ever be. God took care of it, and in doing so, He transformed their downfall into a warning, a silent but indisputable message to anyone else who even considered coming against you. You didn't even need to defend yourself, explain yourself, or go around exposing people. You see, there are always other people involved, some of whom were aware of it, some of whom were thinking about joining, and some of whom were waiting to see if it would work before acting. Betrayal is rarely a lone act. However, they had second thoughts after witnessing what transpired. They understood that touching you was harmful, in addition to being dangerous. They witnessed the demise of someone who was invincible at one point. They witnessed the lies being dispelled, the manipulation backfiring, and the person who attempted to ruin you ultimately killing himself. Now, they are reconsidering their actions. What would happen to them if the last person who attempted to cross you experienced the same terror that they once attempted to instill in you? And that's the strength of divine justice. It safeguards your future, in addition to clearing your name. Your life has turned into a silent testimony. You didn't have to speak, but the message was clear. You shouldn't be taken lightly. They believed that no one noticed every betrayal, lie, and set up. But heaven did. And when the revelation came, it wasn't merely for retaliation. Rather, it was proof that you were always protected, that you were never fighting alone, and that every plot against you was thwarted before it even started. You see, there are moments when we wonder why God permits some things to occur. We wonder why He doesn't halt the onslaught before it begins. What we don't understand, though, is that He permits everything so that when He moves, it is undeniably Him. If He intervened too soon, people could have assumed the enemy was never that bad in the first place, and if He had ended it too soon, you might have assumed it was pure chance. However, there is no doubt that His justice is genuine when He permits them to dig their own pit, reveal themselves, and create their own destruction. The purpose of the disclosure was not merely to make your opponents look bad. It was to expose the truth and demonstrate to you and everyone else that God's justice is genuine, that you are never alone, and that no weapon ever really worked against you. You are now free, free from the burden of their deceit, free from the lies they told, and free from the need to prove yourself, defend yourself, or explain yourself. They believed they were winning, but in reality, They were just pursuing their own demise.